reality is really, really tricky. But with knowledge building and knowledge forum, it sort of happens almost as a byproduct. No, they might be though. I haven't decided. I haven't written the year. Haven't negotiated the year 11 program yet next year. So I like the
given
standard.
the archive nature of the knowledge forum, they could go back and revisit.
Yeah. So, but yeah, the number of students are using some of what they're learning here for their future problem solving. No credits yet, but it's not necessarily about credits, it's about learning.
So you did it for credit, right? In your class, did you actually use any NCA credit that you?
Yeah, I was working.
So it's very different from.
I did last year.
Yeah.
I did when I was using Knowledge Forum as part of the trial. They used it for their external assessments. So all the information they went back to and they used it for their exams, and that was really successful.
Like to
Yes.
talk about it?
You get the smile from it.
Yeah, I'm having a bit of a problem here at the moment, though. For some reason,
on a key drive, but you've got a problem with the internet.
well, I've had a problem with the internet, but at the moment I am online and I can't. It's not sharing up here. That's the problem. Yeah. I'll try going to screen share.
that leap into the unknown, taking some risks in your learning, thinking about what you might contribute to the body of knowledge that maybe no one else has thought of before or made that connection around. And for our students, by the time they get to year 13 in our school system, that is an enormous shift. So
I tend to give up and going there.
So we got the Prezi.
The Prezi you want.
Yes, please. Is it just loading? It's not quite. So, yeah, Ashburton College Year 13 English. And you done something? Oh, you've done. Oh, no. That's it.
Then you might be broadcasting.
Oh, sorry.
So no, I can click your arrow though.
Yeah.
Just, here we go.
Oh, you must be.
That was me. Okay, so my starting point for knowledge building was about turning my classroom into a knowledge building community, changing a culture that as students said after listening to me for a few minutes, so we're going to change what we do, and we've been doing it this way for 12 years of schooling, and this year and our last year we're going to do it differently. And that for me was one of those little moments where I thought, actually, this is a really big ask of these kids. I've been asking a big ask of me in the last couple of years about changing the way I do things, and I've been talking about it at teacher level with other teachers and all of that kind of stuff, but it's not just about me. I'm taking 27 other young people with me, and this is high stakes for them. This is their last year in the compulsory schooling sector, and they've been trained to think in a certain way and do things in a certain way. They're NCEA for the last for them 2 years, in some cases maybe 3.5 if they've done some work in year 10, has got them really focused on what do I have to produce so that it'll be the stuff that the standards say I have to produce so I can get the credits. And it's not supposed to be about the credits, it is supposed to be about the learning. And that's why I get really excited about knowledge building, because it is a way that I can see to shift the focus back on the learning and not just on credit accumulation. So my starting point was relationships and community. And in Samoan culture, there's a concept known as tūlava, which means to look after the spaces between, and it's about nurturing relationships. And in our classrooms, it's between students, it's student-teacher, it's between teachers and students and the learning. It's all of those spaces that happen, and it's about accommodating the politics of assessment, but keeping the focus on new and improvable ideas and everybody working together for the good of that community and picking up those principles of knowledge building. So it also ties in really, really nicely with, ARCO, teacher, learner, together, the reciprocal nature of learning. If you are embedding the principles of knowledge building, then all of those other things by which we're accountable as teachers in New Zealand are actually just in place. Supportive learning environment, New Zealand curriculum, all of those other pedagogical things, I guess. And that's why, as I've indicated earlier, it's why I think knowledge building has so much potential for us. So we start with the learning relationships, and my plan was that in term 1 I would explicitly teach some of the core principles of knowledge building to the students, kind of working with the process model that Wing had up earlier on. So explicit teaching about what knowledge building is, being explicit and honest and open with my students that we were going to be doing things a little differently, that we were going to be becoming a learning community, and that everybody in this classroom has a role to play in that. So it was about getting students to understand agency. Now, the other complication for me is I don't have my own classroom, I work in other people's classrooms. So the stuff around my walls, the spaces that I work in, does not necessarily have in it quick and easy visual reminders for the students about what we're doing. I take a lot of photos so that we can archive stuff. The good thing is then you can share it in all sorts of online spaces. But essentially, I wanted my students to understand that as individuals, we're in a community working together so that new and better ideas that are of benefit for the entire community can emerge out of that process. And introducing them to this idea of progressive inquiry, that ideas are not fixed things that come out of your teacher's head or an e-textbook or off a YouTube clip and into your head and then you reproduce it, that everybody in the classroom has a role to play in improving those. And getting them to understand this thing about we keep trying, we keep practicing, we keep redoing stuff, experimenting. They don't think of English as a science. They don't, they compartmentalise their learning. And when you start talking about we're experimenting in English, it's like, it's quite scary for students to think about that we're taking risks. But in fact, things like what Tam is doing with 1.6 and the standard that I'm going to talk about shortly, an information literacy standard, is all about developing a hypothesis, using authoritative sources and interrogating secondary and primary material to see whether you can prove or refute that hypothesis. So breaking down the silos of curriculum area at secondary school is another big potential area that I see for knowledge building in secondary school as well. There's just a little sidebar learning that I've been doing. Using words like epistemic agency with the kids. Most of the time, to be fair, I don't take on the epistemic bit, but again, unpacking it for them, being explicit, having the conversation with them, listening to their ideas about what this might mean. That it goes beyond it is about self-managing, but New Zealand curriculum, self-managing learners, being prepared for learning, coming with your pens and papers, being on time, doing your homework, that kind of stuff. This is so much more than that. Understanding that it's actually taking control of your own learning, handing back some of that authority around learning to the students, and understanding that they actually have to be committed to being a participant in it. It's almost an obligation, a responsibility that they have as a learner, not to just be the passive recipients that we've heard about before. And that we're just talking about learning, and you've been doing that all your lives, kids, so it's not that new and it's not that strange, so you can be brave about it. And building community. So what I did over the course of term 1, just gradually, one at a time, introducing these 6 of the 12 knowledge building principles in terms of building our learning community and what that might look like. Starting with sort of the kind of simple things that everybody's ideas are valid and valuable, that we're interested in that, the diversity that brings, but that all ideas are improvable, the role to play. So reinforcing the messages that we've been talking about. And then in class, what are we doing? We're talking about stuff. We've done our first literature study for the year, short story writer, lots of discussion work. Use tools sometimes like collaborative spaces and Google and stuff to collect some of that thinking and sharing ideas and getting kids and groups to collect that so it's archivable and revisitable. But building and modelling and practicing the sort of strategies that enable discussion, the collection of that discussion, and then talking about, okay, so how do you know that? How are you going to prove that? Why do you say that? Those big questions that dig a bit deeper and get them thinking about the importance of evidence. And at level 3, but not just level 3, how do you know when a source is authoritative? Why would you listen to me? I said to them, so, you are not going to be spoon-fed. If you think you're here for that, you can, leave my class now. Ideal world. But who are the authorities? How do they know? Getting that critical thinking going. And, you can kind of see how if kids are starting in year 10, year 11 with the sort of processes that Tamara is talking about, by the time they get to year 13 and they're doing literary criticism at level 3 of complex texts, they already would have a skill set to bring to bear to this, and how much more powerful that might be, and the potential for that perceptive, discerning thinking that we get in the excellences. But also this one, the responsibility of everybody for growing the knowledge for the benefit of the community. And I have to say, in year 13, with students who've already had 12 years of schooling in our system, that for me is the biggest challenge. I had students who said, but I don't want to share my ideas. Okay? But you're quite happy to listen and you're making notes about what other people say. Oh, yeah, but I want my idea because, it's not a competitive race. we could have 10 or 20 people get excellence in this class. It's just, you know, I know it's not quite how it works when you start looking at across the whole country, but in terms of in my class, if we all should getting kids to take that on board and change that value system is quite hard. So that, you know, that challenged me to think about how can I enable that better, what might I do differently next year. So we've got community. At the end of the term, I said to the kids, right, next term we've started our film study. We're using knowledge building principles. We've got a good understanding of key aspects of that now. Next term, we're going to use a web-based, computer-mediated space called Knowledge Forum. And one girl in the class said, I hate Knowledge Forum. Oh, you know, really? She had been in an online class a couple of years previously using the old, you saw the old form of Knowledge Forum that Wing showed before. She had worked in that and she'd found it really off-putting. Now this is the same girl who earlier in the year when they got to choose a theme to study and texts to choose to interrogate for that theme study said, can't you just tell me what to read and what to do? Why do I have to come up with it myself? She's a very, very capable science student. But she's very accustomed to having it told to her. So she said this, and I said to her, look, can I ask you to be a little bit patient, a little bit resilient, and a little bit open-minded? Wait till you see the new Knowledge Forum, the web-based one. It's a cleaner interface. It's a bit easier to use. We're now on a New Zealand server, so some of the issues in the past with connectivity and stuff should be improved. There was a few things. I said, can you just be patient and hang fire till you see how it goes. Okay, I can do that. So over the holidays, I emailed the students the instructions for how to get into Knowledge Forum, sent them the link, told them how to log in, and all of that kind of stuff. Sent them the attached document, Ken's How to Use Knowledge Forum doc, and said have a bit of a play if you've got time. We came back after the holidays, and a number had a bit of a play, which was fantastic. But it also threw up the OCD kid in the class who had gone into the opening view that I'd put in, and I put some just very wide open questions about the text, and they were just sprinkled across the view page, and she had gone in and she'd lined up all my notes side by side in the top left hand corner of the view with no room between them for any building because she couldn't cope with it being messy. I said to her, I'm delighted that you've been in and you've learned how to use this and that you want to make it all neat and tidy, but can you just bear with me while I spread it out a wee bit because no one's going to be able to, you know, it's going to become really problematic adding new notes in. She said, could you at least put them evenly across the page? The emotional spaces that our kids are sitting in when you're introducing new stuff to them are really important. It was a really big reminder for me as a teacher. So we had our first day, we started playing with it. Okay, so we did a bit of a sandpit day. I posted a couple of just really wide open questions. So a couple of students said, that question's too big, where do I start? Kind of the whole point. What those kids did was they hung back and they waited until other people had posted stuff and then they joined in the conversation because other people's posts had narrowed down the focus of the thinking. And also on this day, one of the teachers who was part of my professional learning group last year and who's teaching in the BLM this year and who's using knowledge building and knowledge forum with the level 2 economics class, she came in on this day, said come in, observe the chaos, have a look, see what the kids are doing, start thinking about how you're going to use it later on in the year with your class, and she did, and that was a really good opportunity to do that as well. One of the other things we've been battling with is we have gone to BYOD this year. It's optional, but highly encouraged at level 3, at year 13, I should say, and we're working down the school. One of the other problems we had, though, for the first 6 months of this year is that we've been in transition before signing on to N4L. Long story short, it's been incredibly frustrating and complicated, lots of first-order barriers to technology integration, totally unreliable and erratic internet and school network connection. So all of term 1, I've been asking kids to work in spaces like Google and stuff, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Asking kids to trust you, to keep persevering with technology under those circumstances is a really big ask. And I just have to applaud these kids for persevering with me. We're now in a much improved state, but when we first started working on Knowledge Forum, we were still in a state of, you know, totally degrading chaos around this. So I said, okay, we're not necessarily all going to be able to get on. We had students with their own devices, it's whatever they like to bring. We also have netbooks on COW devices to make up the numbers if needed. But we said, if you can't get on, look over the shoulder of somebody else, work in small clumps, find ways to work around this, just start learning how to use it. And that's exactly what the students did. And in fact, Emily here, she had gone on in the holidays, she'd learned how to use it, all logged in, but she couldn't get her computer to hook up. So she went round the class troubleshooting for other people, showing them how to use it, helping them get logged in, helping them find it, and then so she could post her own thinking, she would post on someone else's login, but put her name in the subject line so that we knew who the source of the thinking was for that one. And other students, as they started doing that, and there was the boy in the class who's got our tech guy on speed dial on his cell phone. So it's all right, miss, I've already run Chad, he's going to come and sort this out for me in a minute. People, you know, kids start problem solving. You step out of the space and you give them room to do it. And eventually you get to a point where you're starting to see them using Knowledge Forum for what it's supposed to do. Now, I know that's a little bit small, but basically this boy over here said that for some reason the scaffold into Prezi has kind of gone back to code rather than its original thing. But the symbol of the window depicts the unique way in which John Nash views the world. In one scene in particular, Nash is seen watching a rugby game high above them, and through the window, mathematics equations are scribbled all over it. This could almost act as a filter with the equations on the window, showing how John's view of the world is always interpreted, almost distracted by or distorted by maths, yet in reality, he is broken off from society as a result of the way his mind works. Really, you know, that's what perceptive level 3 thinking looks like. And my other students can go in and they can read this boy's note and they can say, that's what it looks like. So they don't have to believe a teacher trying to kind of find some complex way of explaining what perceptive means. You can see what it looks like. So that was like, yes, we're starting to get there. Knowledge building, new ideas, improved, emerging out of the work of the community is starting to happen. Quite excited about that one. Other things that came through in the process, one student in the class, often in discussion times, it's a very vocal class, you know, lots very accustomed to yelling at each other, yelling over each other, lots of conversation. The difficulty in that is, of course, collecting it, but one boy in particular who's quite good at sometimes focusing on the personal rather than the non-personal, shall we say, in the conversations. And one of the things that came out, so when we're working in Knowledge Forum, the comments have to be about the learning, not about the people making the comments about the learning. Additionally, it's going to be published. You have to think about what you want to say. You can't just start spieling off over the top of somebody else and then realise that your point is incomplete, that you haven't really thought it through, that you can't give a reason for it. The kind of accountability that comes into play for learners when they're working in Knowledge Forum was something that students were reflecting on. And this is just comments that they came up with. This wasn't a response to me questioning anything. I did say to them while they were doing this to, you know, how's it going? What do you think? What are you seeing? What do you think about this process? We'll use it again. I was asking for that kind of feedback, but this is the stuff that they were coming up with. And obviously then you've got that ability to capture the conversation. Students can go back and they can revisit what's going on. And this is that student who went, oh no, not Knowledge Forum. At the end of that day, as she was leaving the classroom, she said, actually, this is much better. And she said, and I can go back, I can review the work, I can look at the thinking again when I need it. And what's happened in the discussion hasn't got lost. So that was another wee, you know, tick. But what needs to be better? Okay, my next step was, so that work was all about film study for external exam. Then we were moving on to the information literacy standard, and the students can choose to use one of the texts that we've done as an external lit study as their primary text for this, or they can choose something from their theme research. I tend to go with very much students choosing the text they want to use, but knowing that the bulk of them will probably use the film study, because the bulk of them will be happy that there's already a pool of resources that are available from past years' students finding secondary sources and things like that. So when it came time for them to develop their hypothesis, I thought, right, so now how can I put a bit more student peer assessment into this, a bit more student feedback and a bit less me? Well, that was a really big fail because my plan totally backfired. Students were really happy to post their initial hypothesis. I said, put in your first thinking. It could be as rough, just the first ideas you have. What do you think you're going to investigate on the basis of the critical essays and reviews that you've read and watched the film and done all that study around it? What are you thinking? Post your hypothesis, and everybody else go and have a look at each other's hypothesis. Post build-on notes, make suggestions you think people could use to refine their hypothesis, questions that you might think they should be answering. If you've read something you think might be really useful for this person, put the link in there for them. Let's build that resource for each student. You know, let each other build that resource. Well, essentially, once the kids were focused on doing their own hypothesis and their own work for this internal, all the politics of NCA kicked in. And essentially, nobody was much interested in going and helping other people fix their hypotheses. So into that vacuum I stepped. So that students were at least still building on what they were doing. They were still self-assessing. They were getting feedback from me about it. But ideally, next year, I'm going to try and find a way to make this much more about peer assessment, peer feedback, than about me feeding back. The other thing I did was I broke this class into 3 groups for this process, just split it evenly into 3, because one view for 27 students is, you know, a bit complex and messy to handle. And the other thing that I did as part of this process, this is to do with this year's professional learning group. A number of the people in my group this year are focusing on student agency and how to enhance that with their classes. They're not necessarily doing knowledge building, but some of them are starting to learn about that. And created, using Google Forms, asked students to assess themselves around certain learner behaviours that were to do with taking responsibility for your own learning. And this was in response to what teachers were worrying about with their class, a range of classes, different levels, different subjects. And one of the questions in this was about classroom discussion, asking students to actually think about their role whenever there's discussion going on. And for my class, they've then been using Knowledge Forum, as well as, so face-to-face verbal discussion plus online discussion. And 52% of the class, so 17 out of 27 have responded so far. But over half of them said, I listen carefully and sometimes answer questions. Only 35% said, I listen carefully, I contribute answers if I know them, and I ask questions. My challenge for next year to me is to find ways to get students asking the questions. And finally, when students play around in online spaces, they find how to use all of the tools. And just to finish on that, at the end of the day, I think there were really successful things about what we did. It's still being used. We're going to go back and use this archived material for revision, for exams, for external, and build on that as well prior to that. Yes, thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions later on. The press is shared.
We have a major problem.
Sorry, that's long.
Well,
we've actually gone into that, right.
we should be at the period of building on ideas, but we still have, Darren and Marina just came from Christchurch, and then you haven't actually said anything.
Why don't I suggest we continue on, but I know Darren, if you pick it up and almost do it as a more interactive type of session where people can contribute and you can share and you can do 10 minutes, Marina, you can do 10 minutes, and they'll leave us 5 minutes before morning tea and afternoon tea and
3 o'clock we must leave for afternoon tea because we stay here for too long. It's not good for your health. Not you leave at 3 o'clock. You have to, right?
Okay, Karen, come on up and
Has anyone got any sort of thoughts or questions or things you'd like to throw out that could actually explore up here? I've got a mix of primary and secondary, and you've got a very much a secondary view so far, but believe me, that's very appropriate in the primary second. In fact, I think you'll have kids, I'm generalising, but secondary, as Mark was alluding to, you get kids who have been through the system and have got a very fixed mindset and the way things should happen. And my kids at primary sort of level, and I tend to see that they're far more open-minded at that point and open to exploration and inquiry and all the rest of it. So hopefully you're looking at this thinking, I can really make this work in a primary setting. Actually, it's the challenges, it's a big one in secondary because of things we talked about. Sorry. So no one's got anything like to throw out in terms of, can you bring up my database?
yeah, I can do that.
What I can do is show you some other bits and pieces that perhaps help expand on things, build on. But no one's got any questions or anything?
Just, in our setting,
yeah,
our kids are asking questions all the time.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not suggesting for secondary when they're doing that. How does that then translate to them when they get to secondary school? I mean, are you finding that there are some students coming from some places that they're used to that kind of questions and those sorts of things?
I had a boy last year in my level 2 history course who, I don't know if you heard of Unlimited in Christchurch, and he was very used to that approach, so he went into it, no problem. And then I had another boy who was the total opposite, who was just stressed constantly. I had to give him so many meetings with him, Azidi, which is a support person in the school, just because he had a very fixed mindset on what teaching and learning looked like in the secondary setting. So I think you find it, and you get many kids go into the secondary setting with assessments and high stakes who they feel the safety of being fed content, so even though they might not enjoy it, they quite like it in a way. So I think some kids just start conforming. Others, I certainly had real free thinkers who just naturally love it, just go into it and really enjoy it and probably enjoy the chance to express themselves in that way.
That's agree there. So I find one student had a overhearing conversation with two students in my year 10 class, and you like it? Oh, I just can't. Yeah, because what is there not to like? You just put stuff down there, and then people will come in with other stuff, and then you find yourself talking about something you didn't even know that you were going to talk about. So it was just a way of capturing the information that my kids are using it at home without me asking them to do it for my work as a way. So I think, I think the questioning is still very much encouraged in high school. I think, it's just, there comes a point where their focus shifts a little bit to.
Yeah, I had a group of 6-year-olds which I worked with in Knowledge Forum in a knowledge building way 10 years or so ago, and as mainly senior secondary, it was fascinating. They were very, very forthcoming with questions and with ideas, a lot more so than our secondary students. While they're very good at sort of coming up with really interesting theories about how things worked, they weren't so good at sort of trying to improve them over a sustained period of time. It was fairly matter of fact.
It's hard with the little ones to get them to be selfless.
Yeah,
They
were very much sort of. Whereas I think as we put students through the schooling process, the right answer and this task-centeredness, which I know Carl and Marlene sort of kicks in a big way, and it does sort of make a difference as to how they operate.
Just wondering how you bring on board parents who don't
Well, okay, can we hold that idea and we'll come back to Darren because we will have a chance to actually discuss them
later on. We can explore some of those
Yeah.
challenges and issues because there are some quite significant ones.
Yeah.
I mean, is anyone, if you're new, are you getting some idea of what knowledge building actually is and the difference between that and inquiry learning? I know when I first came into it, teachers sitting next to me going, this is just like inquiry learning, as Wing was alluding to, but it's actually quite different. So what I'll do is just give you an example. Perhaps how it's quite different. You go to beginnings of agricultural revolution. So I teach level 2 history. I take a highly exploratory approach to that. That's total inquiry based. I actually one year didn't even have topics or anything. It's very thematic and conceptual. And you'd use case studies of different periods of time to actually explore concepts, so like intolerance, social change, and things like that. And so this year, the sort of theme was really, we went back to, it's inspired by a book called Homo Sapiens, I recommend if you have a look at it, and go back really to the beginnings, and the theme really was the emergence of civilization, and the big question, it was all structured around big questions rather than topics, is why people first settled, because, you know, for a very, very long time, humanity, we would settle at all, we roamed around. And there's a whole heap of different theories around what they call the Neolithic agricultural revolution. So at that time, people started settling. And there's lots of theories around why that happened, but no one knows the answer for certain. So it was just perfect for knowledge building because there's no black and white answer to it. And that's challenging for the kids. So what we did basically is put that big question up, which would be somewhere in there. The big question I proposed right at the beginning there is why did people start settling? And the students came in and posed their own theories, which is absolutely not happened before with my course. It's generally been structured around questions, going and find answers and digging deeper and actually helping each other. But this was more around, okay, why do you think this happened? And so a number of students started proposing their theories, and then they would go away and actually start researching and find out, you know, what theories that exist out there. And then what you're aiming for, as you saw with both Marg and Pam, is the chances for building on, as we see chains, we see links. So I'm not sure if you can, because we've quite zoomed in here, but you know, when you've got chains happening like this, going through, so what happens is one student proposes a theory around, you know, something to do with climate change, and another student goes in and yes, yeah, I agree with that, and I found this as well, etc. And so, probably for the first time on my course, I've had students actually starting to really develop on each other's ideas and theories, and then actually go away and find out more. And that's really sort of for me, the big difference between knowledge building and just a sort of a community inquiry approach to things. It's actually, these are ideas, and yes, the challenges I've had in the past are with students who find they can quite easily sharing, it's no problem. Go out and sharing for some students, sharing ideas, making them visible, that's sort of doable, but then starting to actually look at someone else's idea or proposed idea and go, okay, I can make that better, and then this student, I can make that better. That's actually quite challenging. And so the first time this year, I had some of that, certainly far from perfect, but had some of that happening, and because the context was so suitable for it. But it can fit into a wider approach which is sort of exploratory, and you have elements of knowledge building going on. We'll talk about that in the past where it's almost like a scale. There'll be times where it's just knowledge sharing, where they're just going on and sharing things and sharing ideas, and then there'll be moments where they're actually really starting to build up. And for those who are secondary, one of the big differences probably with my course is, and we've got, Brett, is it? Is the QA here? We've had NZQA here Symposium last year, about 6 I think, and we had another, what was his name? I forgot. Approaches to NCA are changing, and you're looking at more evidence-based approaches rather than single one-off assessments. So knowledge building fits perfectly in what this sort of approach, it's very visible and ongoing. So the standards for history sit in behind here. So for example, one of the standards is a research-based standard. So this whole approach is research-based, and that's why I sent to the kids. Actually, this year I didn't talk about knowledge building, just as an experiment. I didn't actually go in and say we're going to be knowledge building, explain what it is, and go in and sort of break it all down. I basically said we're a research team, we're going to sort of work together and digging deeper on these big questions. So we're still doing the same thing. I was just perhaps avoiding some of the terminology just to see if it made any difference. And so NCA, the research standards sit in behind. So basically students are, basically when they're going through, they're providing evidence of meeting the standard on an ongoing basis. So the focus isn't on we're doing assessment, the focus on we're learning about this, and I had to explain to them at the beginning how they work on an ongoing basis, but quite new to them. And then I'd track their progress through the term, for example, and by the end of the term have an interview, basically a meeting where we go through what they've done. And I'll be able to pull out examples and say, look, you met here again, this is where you are currently. Just trying to avoid the whole focus on assessment thing and focus more on learning. And I've been lucky this year, I've only got 8 students. So actually that's, when you're doing knowledge building, actually, 27 is pretty good. Like you've got capacity there. There's a lot of ideas that can be pulled together. When you're 8, if you've got 3 of those kids who really are participating, it starts to get pretty challenging. I've been quite lucky that 8 have been a really good group. I've had, no one has come in and said, this is horrible, I can't stand this, and I'm really having problems with this, which I have had in the past. Individual students go, I don't get this. So that's one other big point with NCA, is actually using an evidence-based approach, and I found that to work extremely well.
Just before Marina takes over, questions, comments?
Do you have an external moderation who you bring this up? Do you send a link?
Good question. So in theory, I could give any moderator access to this. It's online there, but Knowledge Forum allows you to basically pull all the notes together from one student, and I used that for when I was looking through it, and it pulls it all together, and I can print that up if I wanted to, or I can copy and paste that out, and use, which I've done in the past, and use it for moderation. That's quite clear through here.
Yeah, one of the things which Knowledge Forum enables those notes to exist in other views. They can be in parallel ones. So there could be Annalise view, and you can be pulling those notes down, and even create a new sort of synthesis type of idea. So you can have almost a portfolio type of view which you can do, which I would imagine the NZQA would be very happy with teacher commentary.
Ideally, you want the kids tracking themselves and a portfolio type approach, but I'm already throwing so many new things at kids at a distance online. There's a lot of new stuff that putting that in there as well, I think will just be a bridge too far at this stage. So I sort of work with them, and we sort of have interviews where we go through with the NCA where they're at. And I've got kids who are at excellence level 2 standards, just at this point in the year. So it works extremely well for that. And because it's sort of conceptual in a way, it's that perceptive thing, where you're looking at ideas, it fits in really well, whereas history often there's a narrative that they do. And so therefore you can lose those big ideas in the narrative. Well, this is quite different. Yeah.
Actually, you can try with putting the straight, linear posts.
Yes, yeah. I'm just trying to.
Actually, you can show them.
We haven't got it on our. We haven't got the latest version, which enables that linear version, unfortunately. But I'll show that when we go into the Toronto database. Anyway, Marina, come on up.
I was just going to say, I know what you're talking about, because my students can do stuff on it that I still haven't worked out how to do. When they're taking their summaries, they're able to go into the contributions, and they can see everybody's contributions and every link. Yeah. And they're taking their summaries off that. I have to ask them how they do it, which I keep forgetting.
Do you want me to go to
yes, because I couldn't access it last night. I couldn't put it on my PowerPoint.
Okay.
My name is Marina. I teach at Ranger New Life School, which is a Christian area school, so we're a special character school. I have the interesting situation where I teach 11 students under NetNZ online, level 1 economics. I also teach the same number face-to-face in at Ranger New Life School. And so I've been exploring quite an interesting one. I am doing exactly the same standard with them both, using Knowledge Forum for both of them, using the same assessment. Interestingly enough, there is not a lot of difference. Can you just click on produce the choices in production? Yeah. The only difference is that my online students got to play with Knowledge Forum in 2.1, and so that we used it for a little bit of exploration when we did our external, but and my face-to-face students didn't.
but they all got the idea, and they all got the idea about knowledge building. So there are some differences. You can see at the moment, I've been posing most of the questions, but some of my students, you can see some questions happening up here, are starting to work out how to post questions, and they're starting to respond to those questions. Can you go across a little bit and see some of the building on? The only difficulty is, so you can see that there is some sort of building on, but they really don't post very much. Okay, if they're going to post something really big, it tends to be something from a website or from the textbook that I direct them towards. But they are starting, and sometimes in CA requirements, sometimes they have to put questions in to direct them to the information that they're going to actually need to be able to do their assessment. But my online students only engage in knowledge form during our 1 hour VC. I haven't yet worked out how to get them. There's only one lovely student here that you'll see lots of her names. She posts all the time. She's absolutely fantastic. And she's the one that started, a lot of the questions come from her. So she's working at quite a different level to the rest of the class. But they'll only come in and they will post in our 1 hour session. They'll do knowledge form. But they have a Google Doc where they are over time doing summaries from knowledge form, and then they're doing case studies related to it. This is actually only the second year that I've done this standard, but they're still doing it. It's not due until next term, so they're still working on this. But the level of understanding, the level of responses I'm getting this year are far better than what I got last year when I did it the traditional, here's the textbook, read this bit, we'll put a few questions up, here's some sample questions. The responses, they're all going into New Zealand companies and actually looking at New Zealand companies. Last year they just did unrealistic case studies. This year they've got the real life aspect. Some of the problems and challenges, technology, where you've got online students, and it takes how many weeks to take us, Ken, to solve some of our problems. A lot of it's student problems more than anything else. So that was one of my biggest challenges is doing that. What else did I have? My changing mindset away from the individual to being part of a community. I realised one day that I finally won that we're a community. When one student said, "Oh, you've done something with my post, that's not right," and somebody else goes, "We're a community here. It doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to all of us." And so I thought, yes, we're finally a community. They actually understood what it meant to work together. What else? So my next step was, the next time I do it, was thinking about more substance to what they post rather than one-liners. But then they are level 1, so maybe I'm expecting a little bit much from them. I had to teach them to actually put titles on their contributions that would make sense to other people. If I could get up, and you don't have access to my new life one, do you? Do you have access to that one?
I don't know whether I could
No, but if I showed you my new life one, they've got things like yes and you reckon and all sorts of things. I actually had to teach them how to actually put titles in that would be memorable so that when people came back to it, they would know what posts to look for. Yeah, no, that's fine. Issues, basically, just as I said, it's probably the biggest issue was just getting them. And the interesting thing, talking about questions, this time last week, I was sitting in the Christian Area Schools Conference, and one of the talks I went to was all about questions and how to encourage students to ask questions. And I thought that would really fit. And one of the approaches the presenter said was she's realised that we've got out of the mode of asking questions, especially our secondary students have got out of the mode of really asking questions and accepting that they don't have to have an answer to a question, that there are questions that are just questions. And so what she starts her year with is, write me 100 questions on anything. And she said, funnily enough, she her lower ability kids who didn't really contribute, the next day for homework had written their 100 questions. They are fascinating facts on all sorts of things, like why does so-and-so really hear like that. But they were getting into that mode of actually asking questions. And so I thought that next year that when I do this again, I will actually start with that whole, you know, that it's okay to ask questions. And then build from there, how do we help each other answer the questions. So yeah, I've learned lots. I'm still learning. This is my first go at it. I'm praying that their assessments will be really wonderful. I have a suspicion with how much some of them have written that I might have two streams. I might have merits and excellences and not achieves because they didn't complete. But if only they would complete, because I've got to have two, they've got to write up 2 decisions for me to meet NCA requirements. So unless I can pull some other evidence out, we will see. But yeah, but that's me.
Yeah. We are actually at 3:30, and I know I haven't spoken, but I think I'll just very, very quickly explain what I've been doing, and then you can ask questions later. And we can. But my transition really of the last year is to go from a science database towards maths, and I'd held off going near maths, even though I'm primarily a maths teacher. Because I see it as being particularly challenging, and really my question still is, you know, can maths education sort of be done in a knowledge building way? And I'm still grappling with that. I certainly have identified a number of things which make it more challenging, and perhaps in one of the next time for building on ideas, I can share that. But because we are at 3:30, I'm not going to talk. Sorry, is it 3 o'clock? Yeah, and it is afternoon tea. I'm not going to open that up. I think we're better off actually getting up, stretching our legs, and having a bit of an informal chat, and then later in one of the other, what we call it, time for building on ideas sessions, then we can sort of, you know, you can grill me if you want, or you can offer brilliant suggestions, because I really am struggling with making maths work, making knowledge building work at a senior secondary level, because you have actually got a whole lot of cultural practices, teaching practices and learning practices, which by the end of their secondary school actually make it very, very difficult in a fairly black and white sort of subject to do knowledge building. However, I'm the eternal optimist, and I'm not giving up. So you know, I've got enough glimmers of hope to sort of keep me going. But we'll stop it there. And if anyone got any questions at all before we go and get our cup of tea, you can either ask them now or ask the particular teachers there. And I'll get back to my
before you go, I would say a few things. 1 minute about our teachers in our group.
Wait, come on.
That we have been doing in the past few years. Knowledge building research has been done 20, 30 years. But most research has been done were at the primary level. Definitely not in senior secondary. Because when you get into senior secondary, you're talking about examinations, external, right? People would think that it's very difficult to be done at the senior secondary level because of the NCEA thing. But what we have done in the past few years, that teachers could actually integrate the knowledge building approach in their actual curriculum. Not as a project, but as a part of the curriculum, and build in assessment, right, to show that actually knowledge building model can be used, even in senior secondary, or assessment as well. So I think that is a groundbreaking thing in terms of research in New Zealand, actually, that has not been done in elsewhere. Because in other countries, when they do it in primary or even secondary, they usually did it as a project, 6-week project or maybe a term, whatever, not assessed usually, right? But in our case, each class has been related to assessment. That's the first thing that I want to let you know, that is really different what we have done. Secondly, in many of our classes, they were and they are online classes, whereas research done elsewhere, 90%, 99% of them were on-site classes, right? They did a lot of knowledge building taught in a classroom situation, but in our case, it's all online. That has not been done elsewhere, right? That is what we have been doing, can be considered as like new and contributing to knowledge. Not just for research, but actual practice knowledge. Right, so that's what I want to, that we are doing actually quite advanced, I think, in terms of knowledge building.
Even in subjects which you wouldn't normally think.
Like math, biology,
and
physics.
Languages. Which I'm looking at Emily over there. You know, we have got Spanish level 1.
Yeah, that's this year. We did Spanish. One class is Spanish.
Unfortunately, Rhonda isn't here to share.
And in terms of primary, what our teachers, we have done work in entry level, year 1 actually. Right. We are publishing a book, an e-book, very soon on knowledge building with case studies. And in that book, there are 2 case studies in primary. One actually in year 5 and 6. The other one is year 1 and 2 actually. Showing that the knowledge building approach can even be done actually in entry levels like year 1 level. Those 2 cases very interesting. So when the book is out, you can buy it. It's online, but as a member, you're already a member. You will have discount. It's not expensive book. It's very cheap. Right? It's an e-book that we are doing with all the teachers who have actually done work in the past 3 or 4 years. Very interesting book, I assure you. Okay. Well, with that.
Past 3, I've got to cut you off. And I've got
that's right. We need to have go to the staff room, circulate, and have tea and coffee.